Whoa! Do you hate visiting this raid type every day? Do you want to find a quick way to do them even easier? Well, you're in luck, because I have some other teams. Yes, my friends, I have worked on this project for several days trying to perfect these teams, and I finally can present you that I am able to provide you other teams for most of the soloable raids. Unfortunately, due to the way the mechanics work, Tree of Heroes is unfortunately not possible to solo, because the boss will always stay in the middle pretty much, and if the boss doesn't move, your summoner doesn't move much, and they will simply not be able to destroy towers. So you could RNG destroy the wind tower with a fire skill if you just wait enough time, but the other two towers are just simply not possible while walking next to them. So yeah, this one is not possible, but I will show you an order team for this one. For White Shadow Castle, Boiling Waterfall, Twisted Marsh, and believe it or not, Seal as well. So let's start. Okay, so first of all, I want to say that I tested it on 2 different summoners. I don't know how well it will work on other 2, but I have a feeling it shouldn't be too much different, at least for the first 4 raids. So first of all, starting with Fort Prison, I'll show you the teams I used on the Kina, and then I'll show you the teams I used on my main cleave. So for Kina, again, for the first 2 raids, I feel like those are very straightforward. Again, this video is sort of targeted at a person who is a little bit later into the game, because while most of you will be able to order something like Foggy or Metus, maybe even Naraka, the other 2 will require sort of decent runes, or maybe even good runes, depending on who you may ask, and those will be a little bit more difficult to obtain. But for Foggy, the main thing I want to emphasize is, if you do have a Perna, make sure Perna is your main damage dealer, because one of the little wolves, or whatever you want to call them, has a permanent defense buff, which means that Perna's second skill will ignore the defense buff as well as provide a defense penetration inbuilt into it. And Perna will be the main unit you bring into this for the majority of the raids. For the other 2 units, I do recommend bringing an immunity, because it just helps you deal with all of the knockback, especially the knockback that is not coming from a skill that can strip, because one of the skills can strip, but if you avoid that one, and even if you take the hit for that one, the lack of immunity will not really be too impactful. But yeah, for Metus, the same thing. Now for Metus, I will say this is a point where you still don't need to have immunity, but it does help you a lot. Of course, what you'll notice here is that Shushu's AI, I believe it was this one, Shushu's AI was so horrible that she only decided to buff this skill by the end of the run. I think it was for the Kina one. So yeah, if you have Shushu's immunity, you will not be losing mana from this skill, from this little blood pool, and you will not be losing on the damage from the defense breaks and the attack breaks that happen afterwards. As you can see, I have immunity, and even though I'm not standing in the blood pool, I am not losing any mana from it. And from there, I mean, just use a Perna. You can even use other damage dealers. I just find that Perna is the easiest to set up for solo raids and other raids, because you're not relying on the defense break. I mean, I do have a defense breaker here, but again, if it fails to land the skill for like 10 or 15 seconds, the damage is just lowering. So being able to spam that skill, I feel like is just the best, and Perna is definitely the unit that excels the most in this. And now Naraka. Naraka is the point where I would recommend replacing Shushu. It is definitely not necessary, you can still do it with Shushu, but replacing with something like Hiwusa will give you higher success rate. Now, before I talk about the team, Naraka and Marsh are 2 raids where the boss doesn't actually spawn right off the bat. When you are in the dungeon, you will need to use all 3 of your dashes in order for it to even spawn. After that, once you see that the boss appears, you can click full auto and it will be the dungeon. So the reason I choose Wusa here is, first of all, the immunity. The same as Shushu, if you have immunity, you will be immune to the push that the boss does at 80% HP, like this one. I'm talking about this push. If you have immunity, you will not be pushed, so that helps with speeding up the run a lot. And also his first skill will apply continuous recovery, which means that even if you stand in the fire due to RNG, you will never receive higher than level 1 burn for the however long that continuous regen is. And of course, as you use Perna, you will be able to beat this dungeon, because since Perna's damage goes through beneficial effect, it instantly ignores the Naraka's shield. It will do the required amount of damage, and as you can see, in a single hit, the Naraka's shield phase will instantly drop. And now Marsh is... oh, come on, video, play. Come on, you got this, I believe. Okay, well, I'll have to skip a few seconds. Anyway, Marsh is where things get a little bit trickier, especially if you are not a summoner who has a built-in sustain like Cleave or maybe even a Solera, yeah? So the first two picks, Perna and Shushu, should be the picks of your choice. The reason for that is, first of all, Perna, as you can see, you don't even need defense break to do significant damage to the boss. And Shushu is there to cleanse the dust. She is not there for the immunity as much, although immunity does help a lot with some of the attacks. For example, one of the, when she spins, she will simply not do any knockback to you if you have immunity. But mainly, Shushu is there to cleanse the dust, because once the boss applies like level 10 bleeds and like poison on top of that, even if you don't heal, as long as you cleanse those dots, you will be okay. Second part is, as you notice, if your units are too spread out, if the boss hits a single unit, that unit will die. So in most cases, from what I've noticed, like Shushu and Perna always stuck together for the most part. So if they get hit together, they will not die. But if a unit gets hit by himself, it will die. The good part is, for me at least, these two were able to carry the run until the end, because Perna's damage is just amazing, and Shushu as a support is super decent there as well. As you can see, it works, which means that you can sort of be very flexible with the third pick that you have. So for this run, I used a Shimite, which boosts your mana regen a bit, and the strategy with this one is, from what I've tested, in most of the cases, one of the units will die to that attack. And what you can do to increase the success rate is just stack up the damage in the very beginning. Try to not rely too much on that third pick surviving. Instead, try to do as much damage as possible in the very first few seconds, so that you are able to easily carry the rest of the run with the other two units like Perna and Shushu. The good thing about Perna is, even if he gets targeted solo, he will not die because he has a self-revive. So yeah, with these two, usually you will be able to solo the dungeon, and the third one you should go for something like a high damage, a damage improvement. Just don't bring something like Windy, who will give the boss crit damage and defense buff. Like Perna ignores it, but the rest of your teams will be taking way more damage. And as you can see, I tested the run with several different units. I tested with Karambit, who is able to do defense ignoring damage as well. He worked decently, so that's another option. Again, just pretty much go for anything that gives you damage. Also, just wanted to point out that if you do get this stone phase from Kalia, your team will still work, because the damage she does is not that significant. And I believe on Kina, you also get continuous recovery from the passive, so that sort of worked out pretty well. But yeah, as you can see, I left it intentionally here. I wanted to see how it works out if you are unlucky and get to the point of the damage where you are taking it. And as you can see, she's attacking on top of me. All is well. I believe Perna may die here. The Perna die, but the cool thing about Perna is she does self-revive, so you are able to sustain it that way. And after that, even if you're standing in the pool, as you can see, the damage she does is not significant enough to kill me, and even then I was able to pass this out. And again, like, this is more of the worse RNG, and even then it managed to clutch out. and the success rate for Marsh for me was something like 95%. I think I did like 20 games and I only failed once. So yeah, very successful team if you use Perna, Shushu and Foggy, at least for my cleave and somewhat for the... Okay, and now seal. Yes, you can auto seal. This will not be 100% success rate, at least it wasn't for me, but you can significantly improve it by simply getting better runes, getting a better damage summoner, eating something like a food buff for your summoner or your monsters. I've noticed that eating a single crit damage buff increased my success rate by a lot, like a lot. So definitely do consider investing in those if you want. It is a little bit of a waste of gold, but if you can afford it, it will definitely make your runs much faster and much safer. So the thing you need to know about seal. As a Kina, if you are a Kina, because keep in mind this will only work, I tested it on 2 summoners, it should potentially work on 3, it will not work on Orbia. The reason it won't work on Orbia much is because, first of all, she does not have too much good sustainability. Second of all, her abilities simply do not contribute to the team, because this team, all of the damage you do will come from either Perna, yes, Perna is a must here, or another cheap damage dealer such as Cassie in this case. So as a Kina, I will pause the video right here. There are 2 main phases for this boss. At 40% and at 10% HP, he will drop to the middle and he will start that attack where you have to destroy a little guard tower, right? In here, because we are doing order, the monsters will not be able to redirect themselves to attack that, so our goal is to kill the boss through this attack. The way you do it is by using a Perna, because Perna first of all will do 50% defense penetration, and second of all it will ignore buffs, which means she can go through that invincibility the boss has. The second unit, you know what, I'll let run. The second unit you must have in this team, well, not must, but I will say it improved my runs the most at least, is some sort of immunity. Shushu is an option, but it will not be nowhere near as good of an option because her immunity only happens when the target is full HP and there's one attack that applies to heal block. If you're not able to cleanse the heal block, you'll not be able to get that immunity and it sort of becomes a little bit worthless. So Wusa was the second best option for me and he worked super well. If you have any other immunity buffer, something like let's say maybe a Lima or something premium like that, so she will work pretty well as well. Do not try Wind Kina, Wind Kina doesn't work well. This is the main attack you want immunity for. As you can see, like if you get hit by this attack, even if you healed with Shushu, it will simply not do anything because without healing you will not be getting that immunity, and with Wusa you are able to get the immunity, right? So with Kina, your goal is to buff up your team enough to do damage from 40% to 0% once the boss starts that phase. For other summoners it will be a little bit easier. Kina has it, I believe, the hardest of the 3 summoners, and that's only because she does not have any sort of sustained passive. Like if she receives little damage, she is dead, and with a dead summoner you are not able to continue the run. Unfortunately, I wish that changed because Perna would be able to carry it out. But yeah, in this team, this is pretty much what you need to do. As you can see, boss is 40%, he uses that attack where he drops to the middle, and he will use his shield, right? And from here, your goal is to nuke until 0% once that red line, that circle reaches the border of the arena. If you do not nuke by then, you lost the run. I'm not even sure if this was enough. Again, like with Kina, it's really a damage check. As you can see, I think it was very close there, yeah, at 4%, so like if you need a food buff it will be a little bit easier. Now I'll explain the picks a bit in here, right? So the third pick is sort of flexible on Kina because the Fire Kina has an attack buff on her second skill, which means that you do not need an attack buffer from your monster and you can use something that will either buffer Perna's damage or contribute to the damage. So the highest success I've found is with this team, with Wusa, Cassie, which is the Dark Owl, and Perna. So this team gave me something like 70% success rates. It fails like once every 3, every 4 runs. So yeah, for this team, this was the best success. Other units you can consider using is instead of Cassie, you can use Karambit. Karambit was very decent as well because not only does he ignore buffs, he also ignores defense break sometimes. Not defense break, but like defense. I think his basic attack has a little bit of defense penetration, so he works pretty well as well. Or you can just straight up buff the damage, so you can use something like a Windy to give yourself more crit damage. You can use something like a Dusky if you're lucky enough to have him, which will potentially boost your damage so much that it could make this close to 100% success rate because that buff is insane. So yeah, any way to buff your damage will work pretty fine. Yeah, I think I have a run with Karambit as well, so I'll just play the final phase. Basically, Karambit acts the same as Cassie. As you can see, in between Perna's big nukes, there are little bursts of damage, and that's basically Karambit doing damage with his basic attack. Each basic attack does decent damage. If it ignores defense, it will do even more. And yeah, for this run, I believe it was relatively a safe one. I still had like good 5 seconds left before I needed to kill it. So yeah, with Kina, that's the way you do Seal. With Cleave and potentially Soleta, it will be a little bit easier. And now let's talk about the Cleave run. So for the first 3, I will not go too much into detail because this is pretty much the same strategy. The only thing you need to know is that Huahi, preferably Huahi at least, is now the main thing you need for attack buff because first of all, it provides you an extra healing, second of all, attack buff, and it provides defense break as well. So this will just improve your damage. And the reason you want to run Wind Cleave is because Wind Cleave has a third skill, which when hitting a creature, it will give your whole team damage up by 30%, which means that your Perna will do significantly higher damage. And if you do not have the Dark Pumpkin, I don't know what's it called, Dusky, right? If you do not have the Dark Pumpkin, this Wind ability is pretty much a must if you want to maximize your damage. Fire is a decent alternative, but Wind will just allow you to do way more damage than any other element. And yeah, for this one, Foggy, pretty much the same team. For Metus, as you can see, it died super fast. I couldn't even react. Hopefully Shushu buffs immunity this time a bit faster. Come on, Shushu, I believe in you. Come on, Shushu. Yeah, Shushu AI. Shushu AI is brilliant. As you can see, she buffed at 2%. No, wait, she didn't even buff. She didn't even buff. So yeah, if you can, try to use Wusa. His AI is definitely better than Shushu because Shushu usually just buffs when someone is low HP. But yeah, Metus, not a problem. Again, Naraka, same thing. I used the Shushu in here. I think I just forgot to switch, but my Cleave was strong enough to do it with Shushu as well. So hopefully she buffs here. Yeah, there we go. She buffed immunity, no knockback. I will start eating Burn when he starts the phase, but with Cleave I was able to do way more damage this way. Again, Naraka, not an issue. Now, as a Cleave for Marsh, I do use this team. First of all, I switched from Wind Cleave to Fire Cleave because if you are a Wind Cleave, the boss will potentially steal first of all your shield, and second of all, it will steal the damage dealt up, which can do a little bit too much damage for you if you're not being careful. And since we are running on auto, we are more than not careful. So yeah, I use this, Perna as the main dealer, Shushu as someone who cleanses the dots. As you can see, this time the boss hit Huahi and Perna at once and only dropped them to half HP. So this is the conditions where you can survive the hit. Even if you don't, as long as a Perna is alive and preferably Huahi, you will be able to clear the run. As you can see, this attack doesn't matter, it just does knockback and a tiny bit of HP. And after that, I believe the run was very straightforward. You just buff up the attack, Huahi will defense break, and Perna will just finish off with a big nuke on the boss. Okay, and now for the Wind Cleave Seal runs, right? So again, as I mentioned, I do not know whether this will work on Soleta because I know she does have some sort of a death prevention passive as well. I'm not quite familiar how it works, but I do recommend giving it a shot. Keep in mind that if you do use Soleta, make sure that your Perna has the highest attack in your team, since the third skill will only give damage up to the highest attack unit, and if something like Foggy has higher attack, you will potentially fail way more than you should with this team. But yeah, for Cleave, Wind Cleave is a must pretty much in here because of the damage buff. Perna you use as the main damage dealer. As you can see, 40% is finally here. The boss will use his jump to the middle, and from here on out, the cool thing about Cleave is you can do it with way worse runes because you only need to drop the boss to 10%. You do not need to drop it to 0. So the reason you drop it to 10% is because the boss will do this phase for the first time at 40% and the second time at 10%. And look what happens when a Cleave dies. He pops in there, Perna self revives. And the reason you can't drop it to 10% is because your main damage dealer is still here and your summoner is still here to continue run. And from 10%, as long as you reach 10% and the second phase instantly starts, you will be able to clear it pretty much 100% of the time. As you can see, I'll do another run here, and it works like a charm. It is way more successful than my Kina runs. Again, it depends on the summoner. The good thing about this is, if you look at the Cleave's damage, even if you are not a Cleave user, this team will work very well with Cleave. All you need is pretty much have a high level on your skill tree so that the damage up lasts a long time, and also a maxed out passive where the the endure just lasts a little bit longer, right? So as long as those two are maxed, this team will work even if your Cleave is like level 60, no equipment, anything like that, right? So yeah, his main goal here is to buff Perna's damage. His first skill doesn't do damage, his second skill, I mean, he can apply some electric shock, but it's really not the condition that does all of the damage. And as you can see here, as long as we drop the boss to 10%, I think I haven't ever dropped the boss to 0% with this team on Cleave in the first rotation. It always goes somewhere between 0 and 10. So yeah, as you can see, 9.30 HP, Cleave survives, Perna survives, and the reason you want to drop it below 10% and not anywhere like 11 or whatever, if you drop it to, let's say, 11, the boss will trigger another attack, and usually that attack will be the little bombs that get placed around, and in that case, you are still able to win. However, you will need to either do it a little bit faster, because the bombs usually explode before the boss finishes the final attack, or you will need to somehow dodge those attacks. You can sometimes dodge attacks. I know AI does like to avoid it sometimes, or even be lucky where the boss simply knocks you down in a correct direction, allowing you to miss those bombs. But yeah, this team I found the most success with. I also experimented with other picks, so for example, instead of the Wusa, going no immunity and going for something like a Karambit, something like a Windy. Those still work, but they gave me much lower success rates because the amount of damage you miss with Perna by not being able to resist boss attacks is just way too significant. So I found that Wusa, having that immunity helps you way more, and also since he does have a shield, he is able to absorb more damage, allowing your units to be a little bit squishier in the end and maximizing more on the damage, yeah? So yeah, I'm gonna let this run finish. I don't even know whether this one is successful or not. Again, not a 100% success rate even with Cleave. I'd say this one is close to like 80 to 85%. It fails like once every 5 runs for me or something like that. But yeah, sometimes you'll do way more damage. As you can see, the boss barely started the phase and you're already at 20%. The attack buff is applied on the Perna. Cleave is a melee range, so sometimes with that third skill he will miss Perna even though they are hitting the same boss and standing in place. But yeah, I think this will be a successful one. I can see the boss is dropping below 10%, which means he will trigger the main attack right off the bat. As you can see here, the rest of the units even survived. I believe it was because of the shield, right? Because the boss doesn't actually fully kill you. He just does an amount of fixed HP. Yeah, so it looks like they survived. From what I tested with that skill, right, with that main nuke, is it will do like 85% of the damage to 2 of your units, and it will insta-kill another unit, right? Like it will always kill one unit. Looks like this time it killed Perna, but usually it happens that it kills something like Moose or like Foggy. So it's very sort of RNG here, I feel like, as well. But again, the team is successful. You only need Cleave and Perna to survive for this. And yeah, that's about it. Try it out, give it a shot, especially give it a shot if you're a Soletta user, because I think it should work for this team as well on a win Soletta. As long as you have the level 70 ability, you should have way higher success chance. Also, you can apply something like food buffs to increase the chance even more. Make sure to get better runes than I do, because my Perna runes are decent, but they're nothing super amazing. I think she's on like 305 crit damage, so you can definitely do better, I feel like. So yeah, that's about it, and peace.